He saved a baby Bigfoot. Now the hunters are coming for his land. Bigfoot Tales. The storm came back that night colder, louder, and angry. John heard it before he saw the lights. Headlights cutting through the snow, engines growling. Then came the dogs. Not wolves, not wild. Men's dogs. The same kind that never stop once they've got a scent. John looked toward the woods and whispered, "Run if you can. They're not after me. They're after you." Act 1. The storm returns. The blizzard rolled down from the ridge like a living thing, white, roaring, relentless. Snow hammered the cabin roof, sneaking through every crack. The fire inside fought for life, spitting sparks that faded before they touched the air. John Harrow pulled his coat tighter, staring into the flames. He hadn't slept since the night by the lake. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those eyes again, wide, brown, human and not human, disappearing into the storm. He told himself it was over, that he'd done the right thing, that mercy was enough. But mercy always leaves a trail, and trails draw hunters. Outside, something moved beyond the wind, faint, rhythmic, out of place. Engines. John stood slowly, his shadow stretching long against the wall. He went to the window. Through the white blur of the blizzard, he saw them, 3 trucks crawling through the valley lights, flickering like ghosts in the snow. Then came the sound that made his blood run cold, the barking. Deep, sharp, trained barks, men's dogs built for chasing, not surviving. "Damn it," he whispered. He grabbed his rifle, checked the chamber. Only 1 bullet. Not for fighting for warning. The snow at the doorstep was already knee-high. He pushed the door open. The wind slammed it back against the wall. The night screamed, snow whipping his face, biting through his coat. Somewhere in that endless white, the dogs howled again, closer this time. He looked toward the tree line where he'd last seen the tracks fade days ago. The forest was dark, too dark for night. "You better be gone," he muttered, "'cause they're not here for me." He stepped off the porch, boots crunching in the snow. The air carried voices now shouting faint through the wind. Men yelling orders. Metal clanging. "Fan out, follow the trail." John ducked behind the woodpile, heart hammering. He watched as the lights came closer. 4 men, heavy coats, shotguns, slung dogs pulling at the chains. "Found prints by the lake," one shouted. "Big ones." Another laughed, that harsh kind of laugh that doesn't come from humor. "Told you ain't no bear worth a fortune if it's real." The word fortune hit John harder than the cold. That's what this was, not a hunt to payday. They didn't care what it was. They just wanted to own it. The wind shifted, carrying a new scent, smoke and wet fur. John turned. A faint trail led behind the cabin, fresh tracks in the snow half covered already by the storm. His chest tightened. "No," he whispered. "You didn't run far enough." He took 1 step toward the trees, then stopped as a beam of light swept across the cabin wall. There, someone yelled. Footprints. And something else. John cursed under his breath and slipped back inside, slamming the door shut. He dropped the bar into place and killed the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room, leaving only the glow of the dying fire. The dogs were close now. Their barks tore through the wind, echoing across the lake. And between each bark, a new sound answered from deep in the woods, low, guttural rising. Not the wind, not thunder. Something else. Act 2. The search in the storm. The wind was howling now, a living beast tearing at the cabin walls. The dogs were close. John could hear their claws scraping the ice, their chains rattling through the storm. Each bark snapped through the wind like a whip. "They're right on top of you," he muttered, eyes darting to the forest line. He pushed the window open just an inch. The cold knifed his face. Out there, flashes of lanterns moved like restless fireflies. "Spread out," a voice yelled. "Check the ridge." John's pulse thudded in his ears. He could smell the gunpowder already, men loaded and hungry. Then came a new sound, faint but deep. Something breaking through branches, slow, heavy, measured. Thud, thud. He froze. The men heard it too. Their shouts faltered. One of them called, "You hear that?" Another voice laughed, nervous. "That ain't the wind." The dogs went mad, barking, whining, yanking their chains toward the trees. John whispered under his breath, Don't come this way. But the sound was getting closer, that deep, deliberate rhythm like footsteps of something that didn't fear the storm at all. Then silence. The dog stopped. The men stopped. Even the wind seemed to choke itself quiet. In that dead stillness, one man raised his light toward the ridge. The beam trembled across falling snow and hit something. 2 eyes. High above the ground, amber like the firelight of a dying sun. The man gasped. Jesus. Before the word finished, the snow exploded. A roar cut through the valley, raw, ancient, furious. The sound hit like a wave shaking the air. Dogs screamed, pulling back chains, snapping. The men fired blindly into the white gunshots, cracking, echoing off the frozen lake. John stumbled back from the window, heart slamming in his chest. The cabin shuddered with each echoing shot. "Stop shooting," someone yelled. "It's moving, it's moving." But the blizzard swallowed their voices. In flashes of muzzle fire, John saw shadows twisting through the storm, something massive weaving between the pines. One of the men screamed. A dog yelped, then silence. Another shot closer. Then another louder, followed by a sound that didn't belong to men. A cry, long, deep, almost human, shaking the world apart for one heartbeat. The snow fell heavier as if trying to bury the moment. John grabbed his coat, slammed open the door, and stepped into the storm. The cold ripped his breath away instantly. Snow lashed his face. "You fools!" he shouted into the wind voice torn by the gale. "You'll die out here." But no one answered. The only sound was the storm, and something moving behind him. He turned. There, just beyond the fence, stood the smaller creature, the one he'd saved, its fur-dusted white breath steaming in the cold. "No. What are you doing here?" he whispered. "You need to run." "Go!" It looked past him toward the tree line, eyes wide with fear. Then John heard it too. A deep, thunderous growl rolling through the wind. From the forest came the shape of the mother, colossal, half hidden by snow shoulders, heaving eyes burning like embers. She stepped between John and the valley where the hunters had gone. The snow glowed faintly around her, each flake catching the firelight from the cabin window. She let out one low, shaking sound, not a roar this time, but a warning. And John understood. She wasn't hunting. She was protecting. "Go," he said again, nodding slowly. "Take the little one and go." But the creature didn't move. It looked at him then, at the forest, and whimpered softly. Somewhere far off, another gun went off. The mother roared again, louder this time, and the sound rolled through the storm like thunder that refused to end. Snow burst from the trees as she charged toward the valley. The little one watched her disappear, then turned to John, eyes wide with terror before vanishing into the darkness after her. The storm swallowed everything. The barking stopped. The gunfire stopped. The world went still. Only the wind kept moving, whispering through the valley like the voice of something ancient and awake. Act 3. The Aftermath. The storm ended just before dawn. It didn't stop, it collapsed. 1 minute the wind was screaming. The next it was gone. The silence it left behind was worse than the noise. John stepped out of the cabin, rifle in hand, the cold biting through his gloves. Snow stretched in every direction, smooth, untouched, blinding white. But not untouched. The storm had buried everything, except what refused to be buried. He took a few steps forward, boots sinking deep breath turning to mist in the dawn light. The world smelled of iron and pine, the scent that always followed blood. The first thing he found was a dog, frozen mid-run, half covered in snow eyes, open and glassy. The second was a man, one of the hunters, his body twisted near a fallen pine rifle, snapped in two. Snow had covered most of him, but not his face. It was turned toward the sky mouth, frozen open like he'd tried to scream one last time. John stood over him for a long while, then knelt and brushed the snow from the man's coat. His fingers stopped when he found the patch stitched to the arm, Montana Wildlife Research Division. "Not hunters," he whispered. "Trackers." A gust of wind rolled past, carrying a faint echo from the trees, something heavy moving far off, slow distant. He looked up. The valley was covered in broken branches, splintered trunks, trails carved through the snow, where something massive had moved through. "God help me," he murmured. You did this, didn't you? He started walking slowly, carefully following the path of destruction deeper into the forest. The prints were wide, deep, filled with water from melting frost. Each step felt like walking into a place that wasn't meant for men. He passed another broken tree, a blood-stained sleeve, a dented flashlight still flickering weakly. The air grew warmer the farther he went, not from sun, but from something else. Life. The forest was breathing again. Then he saw it. Not the creature, not yet, but the shape of what it left behind, a ring of trees bent outward, snow melted in the center, steam rising in thin white ribbons. He stepped closer, heart pounding in his throat. In the middle of that ring lay something small, his coat, the one he'd wrapped around the young creature that night by the fire. It was folded neatly, dry, resting on top a pine cone split open filled with wild berries. John stared at it for a long time, snow melting on his hair, eyes wide with disbelief. A gift, that's what it was, not a trap, not a threat, a thank you. The realization hit so hard it made him laugh, once a dry, broken sound that felt like crying. You understood, he whispered. You actually understood. A branch cracked behind him. He spun, rifle half raised. Nothing but trees. The silence pressed close again, thick, almost alive. You're watching me, aren't you? He said softly, making sure I see what I'm supposed to see. He lowered the gun, shoulders relaxing, and looked once more at the folded coat. The berries gleamed red in the faint morning light, small drops of color in a world of white. He picked one up, rolled it between his fingers, and smiled. All right then, he said. Debt repaid. The wind sighed through the branches, and for just a second he thought he heard something in it, a low hum, almost like words. Not angry, not wild, just peaceful. He turned back toward the cabin, the forest behind him, silent but not empty. Something had shifted. The wild wasn't watching him anymore. It was walking beside him. Act 4. The warning. By the time John reached town, the snow had started to melt. Water ran in dark lines along the roads, and the valley smelled of mud and diesel. People were already talking. They stood in small clusters outside the diner, and the gas station voices, low, eyes wide. He didn't have to ask what they were whispering about. He could see it in their faces. Fear. A search team had gone missing overnight. The radio was calling it an avalanche. But the men in town knew better. They'd seen the prints, big ones, deep as a shovel head leading straight into the timberline. You hear they found one of them dogs, a man said, his voice trembling just enough to betray his bravado. Neck snapped clean. Not torn, not bit. Snapped. John kept walking collar high, trying not to listen. He stopped at the general store for kerosene. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, looked at him like he'd brought the storm back with him. You been out by the lake again? She asked quietly. He hesitated, then nodded once. John, she said, leaning closer, you ought to stay home. They're saying the forest ain't safe no more. It's never been safe, he said softly. But it's not the forest you should be afraid of. She frowned, unsure what he meant. He thanked her, and stepped back into the gray afternoon. A pickup slowed as it passed. 2 men in uniform, state wildlife officers stared at him through the windshield. They didn't wave. They just watched him until he turned down the road. Back at the cabin, the snow had begun to slide from the roof in heavy sheets. The woods behind the lake looked ordinary again, too ordinary. That was the part that scared him most. He lit the lamps, fed the stove, and tried to keep his hands busy. But the silence kept pressing in thick as the fog rolling off the trees. By nightfall, the quiet had become a sound of its own. He poured himself coffee and stood by the window staring at the tree line. That's when he heard it. Not a roar, not a cry. 3 short knocks, faint, rhythmic. Knock, knock, knock. He froze. The cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. He waited. Again, the same pattern. 3 knocks far off in the dark, carrying through the trees like a voice wrapped in wood. No, he whispered. Not again. He grabbed his coat, stepped outside. The air was bitter, the moon half hidden behind clouds. He stood on the porch listening. The forest loomed silent, a wall of black trunks and mist. Then the sound came once more. Knock, 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 not closer, not farther, like it was waiting for an answer. John swallowed hard, throat dry. "I hear you," he said quietly. "But what do you want me to do?" The wind answered with a whisper that almost sounded like words. "Don't let them come." His breath caught. "Them," he asked the dark. Who no reply, just the sighing of branches, the slow groan of the ice settling on the lake. He turned to go back inside, and that's when he saw it. A shape standing just beyond the fence line. Tall, motionless, not hiding, watching. The same eyes as before, amber in the moonlight, but this time there was something else in them. Urgency. Warning. John didn't move, didn't breathe. Then a flash behind him, headlights sweeping through the fog. He spun around another truck, rolling up the trail tires, grinding over the mud. Voices, radios, wildlife officers. "Evening, sir," one called out, stepping from the cab. "We'd like to ask a few questions about last night's incident." John turned back toward the fence, but the shape was gone. Only trees, only fog, and the echo of 3 soft knocks fading somewhere deep in the woods. A Seat 5, the call of the wild. The officers searched until nightfall. Dogs barked, radios, cracked flashlights swung across the snow. They found prints, broken branches, blood, and fear. When they asked John what happened, he said the only truth they could handle. A bear, he told them. Big, mean. Didn't like being cornered. They nodded, half believing, half afraid to argue. One of them said they'd be back in the morning with a bigger team, more guns, more traps. John didn't answer. He just watched their taillights disappear down the ridge. When the sound of the engines finally died, the forest came alive again. Not with noise, with feeling. That strange, heavy awareness that someone was watching. He went back inside, poured a drink, and sat by the fire. The room felt smaller than it ever had. The clock ticked too loud. The flames moved too slow. He thought of the creature's eyes, that look of warning, of trust, and those 3 knocks. Don't let them come. He rubbed his temples, trying to convince himself it was just the wind playing tricks. But deep down he knew better. Some things aren't meant to be proven. They're meant to be protected. Outside, the wind started again, soft, carrying whispers through the pines. John stood, walked to the door, and opened it. The night air was cold, sharp, alive. The moon sat low over the trees, silver light touching the snow like water. Far off he saw movement. Not men, not deer. A figure tall and still, halfway between shadow and light. For a long time neither moved. Then the figure raised its hand, slow, deliberate, and tapped 3 times on a nearby tree. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the valley, clear as a heartbeat. John felt it in his chest. He closed his eyes, listened to the rhythm, and whispered, "I hear you." The figure didn't move. It just stood there like a guardian carved out of night. "They're coming back," John said quietly. "More men, more fire." The forest answered with a single gust of wind strong enough to snuff the lantern by the door. Darkness swallowed the cabin. He didn't relight it. Instead, he stood in the dark, feeling the heartbeat of the wild all around him, steady, patient, old. The sound of the river, the creak of the trees, the whisper of something vast and unseen, and in that silence, a new truth formed. The wild wasn't calling him to run. It was calling him to stay, to stand between 2 worlds, man and mystery, as the only thing left that could understand both. He took a slow breath, looked out across the snow, and said softly, "All right then. If it's a fight they want, they'll have to come through me first." The figure in the distance tilted its head once, almost like a nod. Then it turned, fading back into the trees, silent as falling ash. The forest swallowed it whole. John closed the door, the wind still whispering through the cracks. He went back to the fire and stared into the flames. "You saved me once," he said quietly. "Guess it's my turn now." The flames danced higher for a moment, as if answering. And somewhere beyond the ridge, under the silver light of the moon, something answered back, a single, long, echoing call. Not a roar, not a cry, a promise. The call of the wild. If you believe mercy still walks through the wild, join us. This is Bigfoot Tales, where monsters still have a heart.